And now we're recording.
Okay.
So today we are meeting a little bit early, which is nice. I appreciate my group members for being so awesome. And we're going to be covering the verb to be in week number 5. And we have a sample that has, it's by a high school student. She is a sophomore, so about 15 years old-ish. She is Filipino and she speaks Tagalog. And she has been in the country for a long time. She hardly ever speaks, but when she does speak, her writing is much stronger. So I think that there is a lot of processing that goes on in her head in order to formulate what she wants to say. So therefore, she's really, really very quiet in class, even though she's one of my top students. Like she reads extremely well, and then she writes well, I think pretty well. But it's her speaking that's actually kind of the lowest for her. And yeah, that's basically it. To give you background on what she's talking about, we're doing a history course and speaking about like the Middle Ages and why the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church split up. And so there are a couple very concrete reasons for that. And she brings those up. So, but that's kind of the background there.
And then were they doing reading, or is this from like your teaching, or how are they making the notes for this?
Yeah, good question. I give them printed out slides from PowerPoints, and then I'll cover the information, but then they can also go back and read and look for the information. And she got to do this as like a formative assignment. It was not a summative grade, so she's got her notes there, and she can use her notes to help her.
Cool.
And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if we're gonna look at the key can-do descriptors first.
Let me touch base on the grammar point for a second. No problem. So our grammar point is the verb to be, which is the most used verb in the English language. Not surprising when you really think about it. Its five primary forms are am, is, are, present tense, was and were, past tense. And then it has be, being, and been. So been is also a past tense. But at any rate, it's in this COCA, which is the whatever it is, the study of words that are used in the English language. One of the 8 forms of the verb to be appears every 25 words in English. So you can hardly, 4% of the entire 450 million words, 4% of them are one of these 8 words.
Wow.
So when you see that statistic, it's like, okay, we need to spend some time with our kids and not accept, you know what I mean? Not just say it's okay not to use this verb correctly, because this is what's going to make them, I think this is part of what makes them sound educated or not.
Yes, yeah. And I know it's even with my it's even with my English speaking kids, they really mess up their tenses a lot, especially when talking about history. They get very lost if it's going to be something that's in the past, and they know it's in the past, but they have a hard time actually putting that on paper.
Using the past tense verb. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, and it was also interesting because there was that also a usage chart where they said like which forms of être or to be were used most frequently. And it had was and were, but by far the most common, and it had am down the list, like I am. And when I first saw that, I thought that's weird because I would not expect that. And then I realized that it was mostly from print. The study was done from print language.
Yeah.
You do not see the word am. People don't write in the first person very much.
Right.
So had that chart been done from a speaking perspective, or if you had contrastive charts for written English and spoken English, the order would have been different, I think.
Right.
I do think knowing
I like how
go ahead.
Oh, I like how they did in one of the charts too, like the common ESL errors too, because you can picture like our students doing all of those, like every day I am work here, you know, and that was kind of cool because I feel like that was out of like our samples almost that that we could see that in action, which was cool.
Yeah.
And so many of those, I think, are errors that come directly from their native language use. Like you don't need to have sometimes you don't need a subject, or you don't need the verb to be, it's implied, or you don't need a word for the future tense. So the more we can know about their native language, I think the better. I mean, that's a daunting task, but the more we can help them.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and I didn't really see anything specifically for like Tagalog. I mean, that's a really only one in our school who speaks it, and we have 3,000 kids. So that tells you like how, you know, this is, but definitely the ideas that apply to all the languages and how using to be change, like they don't ever line up perfectly for no matter what language it is.
Right.
So yeah.
Do you know if she speaks more than one language too? Do a lot of kids from the Philippines speak Filipino that's kind of have some like shared like grammar stuff with Spanish too? Do we know if she speaks like more than one language too, or hard to say?
I'm pretty sure it's just Tagalog.
Tagalog. Cool.
Her up really quick just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure it's only that language, and then obviously English.
Yeah. Cool.
So, all right, very good. Well, we jump into the can-dos now.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Cool.
I was kind of thinking, all right, so I'm clicking on, I kind of think that she's in this just recounting area. That's where I'm just asking them to literally look at their notes. Can you read them? And then can you apply this information? I'm not asking her to argue anything, or maybe a little bit of explaining, but not much.
It's more recounting.
Yes.
I need to make sure, recounting 912. So we're on page 5 of those. Is that correct?
I'm on page 5. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Okay. So I kind of see her, I kind of was thinking that she might be in like this bridging area, because she's sequencing, and she's got this good coherence going on, especially knowing the background information, like all of it's correct. In the way that she's telling me it, and she's got the order there, and she gives evidence, and so I think it's also really organized too, which is why I'm kind of in like that bridging realm. It's not something that is like, her summary is a little bit too disjointed to be perfect as a summary in the reading level for me. And she's certainly not like producing anything. She's taking a lot of the verbiage from the notes that I've given.
Which that is a skill.
I was almost thinking lower, you know, just because if she's because she's including some important information, but do you feel like she's connecting beyond what you gave her, kind of, or not really? Would it be?
I think that she is, because she says that the people in Constantinople that's not correct, able to communicate directly. I said to them, they're very far apart and communication is hard, but she reworked that phrase.
Oh, nice.
To say that they couldn't communicate directly. Like, that's pretty advanced.
Yeah.
Connecting main ideas, main points, events, and central ideas to conclusions. I thought
that's kind of what I was thinking.
I certainly feel like she, showed evidence of connecting main points to the conclusion, which was the task, right? Giving reasons for something. So the task set her up to be able to demonstrate that. She did demonstrate that. You know, how much of that was her own thinking, or how much of that she took from the text. Of course, as you, Megan, would know more, but she clearly took the right pieces. And that's another thing. Sometimes when kids take directly from a text, they just copy directly from the text, but they don't really understand the task.
Right.
I think her answer indicates that she understood the task.
She did. I'm also impressed now that I read this with like great detail here. She brought in something that I only said orally during lecture.
Oh,
so that tells me that yes, she's not just looking at those notes. She's actually listening and being able to process that information, because she says that they were able to speak like Greek and Russian. I only said that Russian thing out loud. I never said that.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's cool.
So,
and that just shows, again, with our English language learners, like how important that oral piece is, that we're always like saying directions orally, that we're summarizing, paraphrasing stuff orally, because if that's kind of one of her bigger strengths, like that is really cool that she picked that out, you know?
yeah, she's really, really good at listening and processing it. And it might take a long time to process, but she gets it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's why where do we, for the note-taking purposes, where do we kind of think this is in the end? If you are at a level 6, does that mean that you have all of the previous levels, you're building upon those, so you inherently have them too, correct?
I'm not sure about that. If you can be at a level 6, even though there may be some holes in previous levels, I would say that in order to achieve a level consistently, you'd have to have pretty much of those holes filled.
Right,
but
right.
I see her kind of in a band with bridging, starting and expanding, bridging, but showing a little bit of reaching. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So between expanding and reach and bridging?
Yeah.
What part of reaching would you guys say? Because I feel like reaching's almost like, hey, you're a native speaker almost. You know what I mean? Like, so
right.
Where do you guys see the reaching point, would you say?
I just think
would you say just being able to
the summarizing content related to notes from lectures or readings. She straight up took my lecture and applied it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Organization may not be super, super strong, but this could also be because it's formative. If she had done something summative where she knew the stakes were higher, we might have seen better evidence of organization.
I don't know. She really takes her time to work on these. This is very typical of what I would see on a summative assessment.
Summative as well. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know.
Mm-mm. So I think even though she has a little bit of that reaching, would we say between expanding and bridging, I guess, right?
Yeah.
For my note taking.
With I think that's right.
Showing evidence of reaching at times.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Cool.
Yep, I agree. Okay, cool. So we got that.
You want to look at, we don't need to look at explain, really?
This was more of literally just like we're counting. Let me go to the explain really quick and just kind of see if I was asking her to really do. She does explain in here. She does it. So, she synthesizes some of that information. Like I said, being able to say that they're communicating, that they couldn't communicate directly with each other, denoting that Latin is Rome's initial language, and that that is different. Those are all things that she had to piece together and to synthesize.
Right.
Cool.
I also see bridging in her writing under the use of explain. In organizes information and details logically and cohesively. She's using things like because, let's see.
Another reason.
And since, another reason. She definitely uses organizational language.
Yeah. She does. She definitely does. Is it like the most organized thing I've ever seen? No.
Right.
But she definitely, you're right. Yeah.
But I've noticed more and more too with like English language learners, even using like different charts, different note takers, like that's hard for English language learners to know like where to put the right stuff, and that she did well with that's impressive too,
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes native speakers are like, oh, I understand a Venn diagram, I understand this, and like with our English language learners, you really have to like teach them and handhold. So I think that shows that she's like, pretty accomplished too.
Yeah.
She knows how to use those charts and things.
That's interesting, Rachel, because I was thinking that I probably need to use, well, my situation is different, but so you find graphic organizers. If you say that they have a hard time understanding where to put information, do you feel like they're helpful, or do you feel like there's a learning curve beyond which they're very helpful or they're not helpful?
Kind of a combination of all those. Like recently in a professional development, the world studies teacher brought in some notes from different students, and 2 of those students were my students, and I feel like in a Venn diagram they didn't know where to put like parallel things. You know what I mean? Like the native speakers put, okay, this person's a scholar, that person's a doctor, this person's like knew how to like
organize it.
Organize those. Where I feel like with English language learners, because there's so many other pieces of processing of things going on, that graphic organizers are helpful, but it's almost like you need to teach or handhold with that stuff. I've quickly noticed that.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's
very interesting.
That's actually interesting. If I'm thinking back, I showed them this like meme that I found, this funny graphic organizer. And when I showed that to them, she was one of the first people to laugh at it.
Really?
Oh,
so
cool.
She like made the wordplay connection faster than her native speaker classmates.
That's interesting.
Wow.
So I think this is a cultural thing. I think this is absolutely a cultural background. I mean, is it something that culturally they use? Do you know what I mean? Or that they've seen their parents use, or whatever. And so that could differ from culture, you know, from native language group to native language group based on how their culture processes information. That video, did you see the video about the non-futured languages? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That was an eye-opening thought.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. Definitely.
So there could be cultural background.
Now I kind of feel bad, like I really don't know much about the Tagalog language, so I should probably look into that a little bit more. Interesting.
Yeah, in your spare time, Megan.
Right? Maybe 10 hours that I'm driving today, I can just
find a podcast about the language.
Yeah. Okay, we should probably keep rolling so that
we're good with bridging for explain then?
Yes, I think so. Yep.
Or for Okay, cool.
All right. So if we go to the writing rubric, I kind of think she's falling. I think that she's in the expanding number 4 category. She, in the linguistic complexity, uses a variety of sentence lengths, and her cohesion is there. I do think it's emerging though.
It needs work, but it's there.
Yes. For instance, like when she says, the people in Rome and people in Constantinople wasn't able to communicate directly, and since during that time, West Europe is a mess. Like, that's not the best way to phrase that, but I get what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
You guys said again that she was in which one? Expanding?
Expanding, yeah.
Expanding, cool.
So she's showing cohesion, but it's emerging. There's definitely some work on clarity.
Yep. And then when it comes to the language, she's definitely using specific and technical language related to this content. I don't think that she has a lack of vocabulary, so I don't even know if this 4 for vocabulary usage fits for her. I think that she's kind of in the 5 bridging, like she's using all the words appropriately.
That makes sense. And as a teacher in a field where specific vocabulary is critical, I think you're the perfect person to assess that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, my native speakers like mess Constantinople up, and they've been calling it the wrong things. And I hit my leg. If we look up at question number 2, I know that that's not what we're looking at today, but she uses Byzantium was able to flourish. She uses that appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And then she uses it later on when technically I'm really just talking about this empire. You can either be the Byzantine Empire or Byzantium, and she doesn't screw that up. My other kids screw that up.
Wow,
that's awesome. Yeah. The adjective and the noun form
that's right there is like mic drop for her. Woo.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Yep, definitely. So let's say that she, in linguistic complexity, she's expanding, but in vocab, she's in bridging.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And then language control, I think that it's back to expanding for.
Mm-hmm.
She's generally comprehensible. The errors really don't impede the overall meaning, but they just are probably reflecting her Tagalog language.
Right. I agree. That's where I was going to put her, was in expanding there. Because, yeah, her errors don't impede comprehensibility, but I would say it's still, there's still a little bit of distance between her and a similar native language, English professional.
Yeah, it kind of feels choppy, as I was like, you know, like even though she gets some of those main terms down, like kind of when you just the wasn't, the can't, the I can't tell if she's saying like learn or learning, they can't do, like just some of the verb stuff, and then almost some of the contraction stuff, I feel like for her is hard sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
Yep,
definitely.
And even some of the errors that we're going to talk about in a minute, when we actually analyze the errors and give strategies, those are indicators that she still has a little bit of a ways to go.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. All right, so if we do the specific grammar points, are we good to move on to that?
Are you ready, Rachel? Note taker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably review this time. I'm sure I'm going to miss things, so I'll probably send these notes out to you all and be like, what else?
Yeah,
this is a heavy one.
No problem.
No worries. So as I found her, I found three verbs with verb errors with to be. The first one being in her first sentence, the reasons why Christianity split into two was because. So she has an error there because her subject is reasons, plural, and her verb is was.
Yep.
The reasons were.
The reasons were. Yep, there you go. That's exactly it. Yep.
So in that case, that's basically a plural singular subject verb agreement problem.
Okay. Yeah. And then it's funky to me when she says, so the reasons why Christianity split into two was because the people in Rome and the people in Constantinople wasn't able to communicate directly. That she weren't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what she's struggling to do, I think, is to identify grammatically what the subject of her sentence is and pull the other stuff out of the way and focus on reasons were, people what weren't. Because if you gave her that as like a slot activity or a grammar exercise, and you said the reasons, and then you gave her was or were, my guess is that she could choose it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm impressed.
She might think that Christianity is the subject, in which case Christianity was. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
She takes another noun that's in between the actual subject and the verb, and she makes agreement with something that's not actually the subject of the sentence.
Yeah. Yep, I see that. I'm impressed that she is consistent, though. She's was, and then she's stuck with wasn't. So that's she definitely like comprehends what she needs to do. It's like you were just saying, no, which is the actual subject that we need to identify.
Right. And I think in her writing, that's it's very clear that is something that she benefit from, some instruction on that kind of thing. Can we move down to instructional next steps for that error? Because I feel like that's basically the same error repeated twice.
Yeah.
If I were teaching this and I had this writing sample, I'm sure that there are other students who have similar things. I would pull out examples of sentences and pull the verb out and have the kids choose, but using their writing samples. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. It kind of showing an example of what the proper verbiage would look like, or the grammar would look like. Yeah, for sure.
And taking the verb that they put in there out and maybe giving them multiple choice. Is this was, or is this were, or wasn't, or weren't? and why, and then talking as a group, why is it? And then even taking your, blacking out Christianity, split into two, and making it clear that reasons is the subject for that verb. And that's why it's were.
For
Right.
context, is this your class where you have a couple English language learners, or is it just her in this class?
I do. I have quite a few, and none of them are Spanish.
Okay, nice.
They're all some
Interesting.
zillion different Asian languages. I'm like,
Interesting.
You know what, though? I feel like our native speakers could benefit from this exercise too. This would not be something I would just put with my English language learners. This is an exercise that all kids at that age or any writer can benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. I was just trying to understand if, not that she wouldn't feel like singled out, just the dynamic of like, oh, if there's a huge group, maybe, that can be like in some group work, kind of pinpointing some of those things too. But
or you can do it from one class and share it with a different class so no one sees their own mistake.
Yeah.
She's
also someone who does a really good job. Even if you just give her the right example, she models very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually took one of her paragraphs she had to write for something, and I went through with a fine-tooth comb and corrected everything, and she was so thankful for that. She was like, nope, this is great.
That's awesome.
I can completely use this and model myself in the future better. So she's a really good direct instruction person.
Learner. Mm-hmm.
And that's cool because like last week we talked about feedback and how important that is. Like that's really cool that you're giving that to her and how she's craving it,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you said that there was a third one that you noticed in there, if you want to take
let's see. And since during that time, West Europe is a mess.
Mm-hmm.
That's a verb tense issue. That needs to be past tense, right?
Yep. And I think you took this directly from the notes because I actually have it written, Western Europe is a mess. And
right.
So I don't think you conjugated it.
And at that point, you can have, people can narrate stuff from the past in the present tense as long as they remain consistent in that tense. So, did you pay for this, Megan? It says it's upgraded.
I didn't,
hope you
but
didn't.
It just gave it to us for free, so yay.
So I think too, in that maybe one-on-one instruction with her, pointing out that when you're saying was and wasn't, then when you continue that thought, you need to make is in the past as well. Just that parallelism.
That's another lesson that I can do for the entire class. And it's not even necessarily the slots or whatever. I could easily have a conversation about, look, guys, you can choose to talk about the past in a present tense. You just have to stick with it the whole way through. And we could even do it like kind of like a little game in itself. Like I easily turn that into a Kahoot or something and say, here's this sentence. What's the next sentence that can follow logically? Because it's very acceptable to do that. I think that they get tripped up with it though, because it's past. It has to be in the back. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, and that could be a fun thing to have two groups take the same idea, and this group writes it in the present, and this group writes it in the past, and they share with each other, so they see how it's the same story, it's the same information, and both of them read very smoothly and accurately, but they're different.
That's actually, I love that, and that is a skill. My kids have a really hard time with that, and I am always talking about history like it's right now. I'm like, oh, and then he got all mad, or and I think that sometimes that confuses them. That's a little bit of feedback for my teaching strategy is, yes, guys, I am using the present tense. It's just to keep you more engaged.
Yeah. And I feel like that piece where one group writes in the past, one in the present could be so great again for those kinesthetic learners. Like you could almost like be acting it out or like dressing up and, bringing in props. Like I feel like with my language learning, when my teacher and German would talk about like wrestling and it's called ringing, he would be like, oh, and they're wrestling, they're ringing, you know, like just those movements and all of that. I feel like is huge for a lot of learners, especially when a lot of learners are better at like taking in the information orally, you know.
Right. You know, I just thought of something else. Sometimes what I'll do when I have kids do, you know, small group activities, you just go get the butcher paper, just a big chunk of paper, and you put it on a table and 3 or 4 kids work on the same project. So you could have them writing it in the past, one group writing it in the present, and then in each group you have illustrators that are illustrating the information around the edge. And so then they realize that when they see the pictures of the story, the pictures are going to be the same, basic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The depiction is the same. Just the language choice that we use makes it slightly different, but they're both accurate. So you'd have your kinesthetic, your kids who draw, your kids who write. You could have different kids engaged, and then they share their stories and post them. I think that could be cool.
Yeah, I like that. That definitely could be cool. Very cool. All right. So that's our next instructional steps for all 3 of those mistakes.
The only thing I wanted to point out, the only other thing that I noticed was in the false text on page 108, they say contractions are more common in spoken and they are not acceptable in academic writing. So, you know, there wasn't, I mean, that's not something our kids use contractions, but I think it's worth pointing out that some of those are more common in spoken language. And once we're starting to write academically, would, you know, were not is a good option.
I mean, like, I'm not trying to be jaded. I'm like happy I'm getting work back from
No, I
kids,
totally
you know
understand.
what I mean?
Yeah. I know, I totally understand. And
I work with that academic piece a lot. I'm like, guys, you can't just throw, you know, like slang words in here and consider it to be, and they do it all the time in their writing.
Or even just the idea of substituting or not, is it the same thing? Just bringing attention maybe to that. And I agree, it's not a major point, and it's not something that I would address with kids who are struggling, but that's a next register kind of.
Right. And she might do well with that. I mean, she would do great just to know that she could be professional by writing without contractions.
Right. But all of our writers.
You could almost make a joke with it sort of too, and like have kids texting back and forth, like have paper, but it looked like a text screen, like a phone screen, and like try to do really like academic language talking about these issues, you know, like, or something like that as like a joke of like, okay, this isn't text language, but let's pretend we're texting each other. You know, we can't use IDK as like, I don't know, with my middle schoolers. I catch stuff like that all the time too, but
yeah.
So, okay. I'm feeling pretty good. Where do we think we're at?
I think we're pretty close. The only other verb error was so uses languages that is near to their location, and again, people uses. So she has an issue with people making people singular. Making people like he uses, she uses, people uses, instead of recognizing that people is a plural subject. So I think that would just be a focus. We see it in the verb être, but we also see it later in uses. So
it needs to just be use. Right.
So you understand that people use is like, she's going to use the same form that they use, not the same form that he or she use. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, and the reason I would bring that up simply is because she does it with people earlier, and then she does it with people later. So she's just putting a singular verb with a plural subject, people. And that, again, with this kind of a student, probably pointing that out to her one time, that the word people uses the same verb as they.
Yes.
Verb form is they. And she probably won't make that mistake again.
Right.
Awesome. So that's what I see. But I was impressed. Honestly, Megan, I'm like, holy cow. This is impressive for a kid who's learning English.
I know. She's great. I just love that little peach.
I know.
Aww. I'm still stuck on the Byzantine and all that of like using those huge words correctly is what like I'm still thinking about that we talked about 15 minutes earlier.
Oh, it annoys me so much about my other kids. I'm like, you guys, you have no excuse
Right.
He's blowing you out of the water. Like,
I feel that way when I have kids from my exchange student kids who become my top students in French. I'm like, come on, French is the third or fourth language. It's a second for you guys. Let's roll here.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Oh,
all right. Very good. I guess I'll stop recording now if that's good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.